Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the team of volunteers at HR at 8 p.m., I welcome you all to the 17th episode of ABCDE, Academia, Business, Consulting, Development, and Entrepreneurship. The topic for today is making youth employable current times. It is very crucial for our country to encash the demographic dividend. You may be aware that India is becoming one of the youngest nations in the world with the average age of 29 years. Japan's going to be at 48, EU 45, China at 38. In Japan, the number of adult diapers being sold is more than baby diapers. So India has the opportunity to become the skill capital of the world, which is the visions put forward by our Prime Minister. But in order to do so, we have to make our youth employable with relevant skills. Now I'll re-emphasize the two key words, employable and relevant. In order to be employable, our youth need to have relevant skills in line with their passion and aptitude and what the industry wants. Then comes the question, how does our youth identify passion and aptitude? Most of the ex-youth, people like me, didn't know how to find our passion or aptitude. We just jumped into the Ganga, which was our career, and flowed with the tide, most of the time trying to please our parents and neighbors and society to get some status and a matrimonial passport. Now, when I look back, I feel I could have done differently. It is not a regret. Anyway, with our learnings and experience, we can still empower the next generation with the right tools and the knowledge to face the challenges of the VUCA world. And that is really the topic for the day. Our expert speaker is Rajeev Bhadauria, founder and partner of Ebullient. Rajeev will be introduced shortly by our moderator, Sukhanand Joshi. Sukhanand has a postgraduate diploma in industrial engineering from National Productivity Council and has done MMS from Pune University. He has over 36 years of work experience in operational excellence and business process reengineering. He has worked with companies like Bajaj Auto, Thermax, Babcock & Wilcox, Essar Steel, Sterlite, and TVS Group. Currently, he is based in Pune and helping the SME sector with his expertise. He is a chartered member of Rotary Club of Aund, Pune, and presently serving as its secretary. Before I turn over the floor to Sukhanand, I would like to inform you that this session is being recorded. In order to keep the background noise to a minimum, the mics have been put on mute, and the moderator will take up questions on your behalf. Please keep writing in the chat box. In case you want to ask the question yourself, please raise your hand and your mic will be unmuted. I'll be summing up after the Q&A round is over. Over to you, Sukhanand, to conduct the session.
Thank you very much, Bhatnagar ji. It's my pleasure to introduce Rajeev Bhadauria. He is a very, very seasoned HR professional with over 36 years of career experience with large companies like NTPC, Reliance, Anil Ambani Group, JSPL, and senior most leadership position covering HR, legal, business, and now he has switched to the consulting and entrepreneurship. Having had a year-long stint with the Mercer HR Consulting, a well-known firm, as their senior industry expert. Now he is the founder and managing partner at Ebullient, a learning and OD outfit given to redefining learning and leadership paradigms. Besides using creative ways to coaching senior executive, especially with a futuristic perspective. As a part of mission to make the 400 million youth of India employable by 2025, he has co-founded My Transform, a world-class process-based career counseling and learning platform, which uniquely connects learning to work life. Using artificial intelligence and machine learning support, which helps students self-explore widest possibility of available today, then be inhibited and limited by obvious few. Here is Mr. Rajeev presented to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joshi, in fact, and Atulji for this opportunity. Of course, Friday evenings are generally not meant to discuss something as profound as enabling employability to youth. But the very fact that we have all assembled, in fact, shows the earnestness and shows the fact that we couldn't wait for the coming Monday. And that's important. It's important as well as urgent. Now, the context of employability, before we discuss, we must kind of set the context of today's discussion firstly, and the thread of it. And I'll briefly, in fact, lay out how will I kind of, like to discuss this issue and unpack things one by one. Firstly, the important thing is about the context, the coming future, reasonably close future, which I think we can always need not predict, but at least we can prepare ourselves for if we know what are the things which are shaping the future that is going to come. The other aspect is enabling the youth for employability. Now this, as Atulji rightly put, in fact, is the context of relevance. Relevant to the context. How you make yourself relevant to the context where you can have a space in the workplace and as a workforce, which is absolutely engineered to cater to the context as a relevant contributor. Now, work as we understand is, of course, having twin meanings. In fact, one is the fact that it is useful to the person who is, in fact, doing that work. It has an economic significance. And the other most important one is the meaning that one has out of this work, that one draws from this inward as well as outward and around us. So that is the concept of wisdom that one gathers while working. So work is a great enabler of virtue. It actually enables us to raise ourselves up as a person of significance and full of meaning. Well, there was somebody who was asked as to what is the real problem of humanity today. And I have no hesitation to say that this person replied, I think he was E.O. Wilson, one of those sociobiologists. And he said, the problem of humanity today is Paleolithic mindset, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Now, when we say this, these three aspects are very, very important. Because when we say Paleolithic mindset, we are always governed by what is the past. We are still governed by precedents, what has happened. And therefore, we have the fear of change. Fear of change comes out of three basic contexts. One is the fear of failure. The other is failure is okay, even if acceptable. The point is that fear of judgment by others. And third, the most important one, fear of my own inhibitions, fear of my own cynicism. Now, this actually holds us from changing, and therefore the Paleolithic mindset always operates within the context in which we have grown and we are comfortable with. The medieval institutions is that we are out of context with the realities, in fact, and therefore the kind of competencies that are required, the systemic thinking, the behavioral changes, the belief systems are not in alignment with the context in which we exist. And of course, godlike technology is creating a lot of disruption. And disruption of technology is causing turbulence in the market. And therefore, there is a lot of chaos. There is change which is taking place not over a period of time, but at every given point of time. Which means parameters are not changing sequentially anymore as they used to earlier, where we had the comfort and luxury of responding later and reacting or holding on our reactions immediately. But now things are changing not sequentially, but simultaneously. And therefore, the magnitude of change and the complexity of the change is becoming more and more humongous. So if we say that we have to prepare the youth for a context of what is rightly called the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity, is absolutely a great question to be answered. So let's begin from the beginning, in fact, and I have a small presentation. So what is this context, in fact? Because it all started way back in 1998, when the globalization was the business driver, technology driver was the Y2K bug. The Y2K bug was overcome and there was an overkill of technology. By 2007, you have the Twitter, you have the Facebook, you have the iPhone, you have the business performance platforms, the Web 4.0, 5.0 applications, and that's the start of the third or the fourth industrial revolution, where cyberspace converges with physical and the biospace, which we'll deal with it as we go on. And I'll explain it towards the end of the presentation exactly as to what is meant by this convergence of cyberspace, physical space, and the biospace. So the idea is that Industry 4.0 is exemplified by basically IoTization, the Internet of Things, the connectivity between the cyberspace, the physical space, and the biospace. It interconnects all the three. In fact, and uses AI and ML, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and based on big data analytics. So that is Industry 4.0 applications. And if at all we have to prepare the workforce, it is for this fourth industrial revolution. That is the way forward of technology disrupting us or enabling us, either way. Of course, we see that there are sensors all over, and IoT works in an atmosphere where there is all interconnectivity, hyper-connected world with billions of sensors all around. And in fact, they are possibly watching each and every event occurring at every place on earth. And when we live in 2020, long time ago, people were talking about how things will change. The need for these skills would be very differently placed from 2015 to 2020, where complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, service orientation, negotiation, cognitive flexibility would be the skills which are now predominantly on the rise. And they will be the ones, they are transferable skills. They are the skills which are general purpose life skills, which beyond the domain help us, in fact, through subjective interface, creating more meaning in the current context. Now, this is skill disruption. Because of this technological disruption, 35% of core skills will change between 2015 and 20. And that's what we've seen in the earlier slide, that the ordering of the skills, in fact, and the content of the skills is very different because of the fact that now you have to work in an environment which is created by the Industry 4.0 revolution. And this is what is the 5 top skills, which account for almost 80% of the skills that would be required in this context, are the ones which are on the rise, and the below ones, which were technically the second and the first industrial age skills, the resource management skills, the technical skills, the content skills, they are on the wane. And this is significant because what is important is that the left part of the brain, the lower part of the skills, the lower skills, which exemplify the left part of the brain, has almost reached a plateau. And these are mostly those transactional skills, which anything which is programmable and predictable there would be automatically, for the efficiency reason, taken up by the robotics. And the 5 upper skills would be the ones which will be developed and would be required to be developed as human skills. And by 2030, more than half of nearly 2 billion youth worldwide will not have the skills needed for the jobs of the future. Well, that's with a caveat, unless reskilling takes place at the level, and reskilling into the arenas that we'll discuss as we move on this discussion. That's where you prepare tomorrow's workforce for the fourth industrial revolution. But then we have to realize that for employability, it's not the skills which are required alone. There is a wider context of what you call the basic domain knowledge, the domain execution skills, the concomitant attitude, and contextual core. The skills could be the individual skills and the cross-functional skills. The domain expertise is, of course, the knowledge that you'll have about the subject that will require. It's not that maths, physics, chemistry, history, biology will go away. But the point is that the attitude and the mindset that is associated with it will also have to change. It has to undergo a transformation. And the contextual core values, because core values are stuck in the context which is relevant today. And we'll definitely discuss that and see how we can remain relevant in the world of the future, which has already arrived in sense. Now, when we talk about skills and knowledge, what is important is that being in the part of the fourth industrial revolution, what we are undergoing is a tumultuous change of consciousness. And it is here that the intellectual quotient alone is not good enough. The emotional part is important, and so is the inspired intelligence, which we call the spiritual quotient of an individual, along with the physical quotient. But these 4 quotients are not necessarily all in all. We have to go beyond these into the entrepreneurial intelligence, which gives us a disposition of risk-taking, the strategic intelligence, which actually gives us the right orientation of the mind to take a decision and balance between the now and the future, the present, quarter on quarter, and the future growth. Transdisciplinary is the approach, a more systemic approach in understanding the realities today in an interconnected, hyperconnected world, where it gives us the right perspective to look at things from a wider angle and a more holistic angle, in fact, to understand the reality. Ecosystem intelligence is very important because as we face the global warming and the climate change as a result of that, that becomes very, very important. And so is now the Socratic intelligence, because when technology has its pernicious, implications where the dark net is existing along with the bright net, and you have to be very clear about how you remain ethical and use of ethical principles in creating technology, in working upon it, conceptualizing, enunciating, and executing it. And above all, the models and the ethical intelligence, which will remain the fourth industrial revolution intelligence predominantly. And making this whole complete would be the real essence of being a digital native and somebody who's rightfully a citizen of the coming future that has arrived. And that is something which is very obvious. I mean, there is no pun intended here. The point is that we can always see the future coming. And of course, we can't predict. And if we cannot predict something, let's not be disheartened. We can at least prepare ourselves. When just in time fails, just in case scenarios can be built over. And this is the welcoming to the Industrial 4 revolution. And here what we find is that in the first three industrial revolutions, the corporations were empowered. And it meant scalable efficiency, doing things right. But scalable adaptability comes with the fourth and the third industrial revolution, and doing the right thing the right way. And it empowers people, especially the social aspects of the digital technology is empowering the people. And this is what is making a difference to the requirements of and the relevant criteria that will be required for the youth of tomorrow to remain relevant and employable. It blurs, as I said, the physical and the cyber digital divide, impacts the socio-economy, industry, government, and individuals, unlike the earlier ones who impacted only the corporates. Its impact on society is bigger than the industry. And that is the relevance of Industry 4.0. Now just see, this was what I was talking about, that, if you see the point of change where the extrapolation is not getting relevant, where linear extrapolation loses its relevance. This is the 5,000 years of human history. I mean, it's not to scale, but when the steam engine came, electricity, computer, and telecom, still change was at a particular manageable rate. But with the fourth industrial revolution, with the convergence of cyber, physical, and the biospace, just see the exponential growth where change is taking place at every given point of time, not just over a period of time. So we have to therefore respond in reaction time. Now it is very clear that with this tumultuous change of market as well as technology, engendered by technology, actually, the trajectory taking exponential growth into account is absolutely very different from the one that is trajectory, which is based on the past growth rate or even the current growth rate. There'll be bad predictions. The world is becoming less and less predictable. And this is the truth behind the ambiguity, the vulnerability, and the kind of, fact that we are not able to predict the future. That is the crux of the matter, because now the 21st century would be defined by people, in fact, for the sake of competence, in terms of adaptability, in terms of managing the uncertainty, in terms of agility, adapting, upgrading, modifying, and changing yourself so fast that you almost respond in reaction time. There's no doubt that we are living through the biggest shift in human history. And because of this is the reality today. Shelf life of technology is very short, that of an idea even shorter. Now that defines the moment of truth for us today. And therefore, this was very relevant for us to understand. All those earlier slides were leading to this, that right now, we have created a situation where shelf life of technology is very short, but of an idea even shorter. The Moore's law, there are two things. In fact, over less than 2 years, what it would do, it would increase double the capacity or the processing capacity and reduce the cost to half. And that is the place where we are in. In fact, it's a very interesting scenario where marginal cost of production is coming close to even zero. And when quantum computing takes over, we can very well imagine what would be the context. Now, here comes the crux of the matter. I mean, that moment of truth where the shelf life of technology was short, but an idea even shorter. there are certain things which have come out in the context of this godlike technology. Now, this godlike technology has given us a context where we need to recalibrate our belief paradigms, changing behavior, and therefore its impact on business outcome. We have lived with a belief system of a scarcity-based economy, where it was based as far as the first or the second industrial revolutions were concerned. Now, here it would be relevant for me to kind of, come out with the fact that there are three principles actually, or three domains which determine the context of a civilization at any given point of time, and our belief systems and our behaviors concomitant to it. First is the way we communicate. The second is the way we use our energy resources of those times. And third, what we use as the mode of mobility. So communication, the energy, and the mobility. These three determine the outcome of a civilization at any given point of time. In the first industrial and the second industrial revolution, the telecom and the telephone were the means of communication. The energy were the fossil fuels. It could be oil or gas or coal. And the mobility was the railroad. And of course, when the internal combustion engine came up, the roads, the road transport, in fact, the cars and the jets and so on and so forth. Now, with the fourth industrial revolution, when we talked about convergence of technology, these three things become very different. The communication mode changes to cyberspace and the internet, and the energy is now being progressively more and more on the basis of technology, of course, would be used there to use more and more renewable and non-fossil fuel-based energy sources. And the mobility would move from, of course, it has moved from the fact that we are not using fossil fuels, but electric, but now electricity made out of renewable resources only. And that ultimately would also lead to automotive transport, because automation in transport where driverless would become the most relevant mode of communicating. Now, here is the context in which one is the earlier context is a mindset, or the context or the belief system or the contextual paradigm was inhibited by scarcity mindset. And therefore the mindset was such. With the fourth industrial revolution, the godlike technology, today virtually we can say that, we are in a consciousness of abundance. So this changes the way we look at business, the way we look at our orientation, at our perspectives, at our dispositions, which are very different. And just look at it 4 or 5 of these assumptions, which generally go unverified. Now, there is a conventional belief paradigm of the first and the second industrial revolution, the new belief paradigms of the third and the fourth industrial revolution. The earlier was limited and inhibited by assumed boundaries of scarcity, ever expansive boundaries, boundaryless horizons. The belief perspectives, of course, as I said, critical to enunciated and understood, because belief governs or regulates behavior, behavior changes or transformation impacts the business outcomes and solutions. So it is very relevant. Now let's see the 5 of them. See, the first conventional belief paradigm that we believed in inherent constraints. Now the new one is inherent potential. You lived with in fact, assumed boundaries of only the known. Now you can kind of explore beyond the boundaries of horizons, beyond horizons of the unknown. So there is an inherent potential in whatever we have, whatever we work with. Our mindset expands, and that is why it creates fundamentally a different situation, different context. Inherent complexity. Now, complexity to inherent simplicity. Simplicity, because once you have even the technology helping you out, you can go through the kind of, the complex mechanisms and still understand the method in the madness and inherently understand things simply, rather than, go by the complexity and get confused by it. That's where the technology can be used. In fact, the big data analytics can help us understand many things which earlier we were kind of, confounded with. Now, this is very important. When you are working with the scarcity mindset, you're talking about getting a larger size of the pie in a given cake. When you are believing in win-win situation, you have a technology, you think of increasing the size of the cake or having another cake altogether, rather than getting into conflict. So here, collaboration, here, support, here, win-win situation rather than conflict is at the fore. In fact, and collaboration rather than competition becomes the most noble virtue and the value to be, in fact, dealt with. This is the way we see open code sourcing, we see open business models, we see what you call the open collaboration between so-called erstwhile competitors, where wisdom doesn't in today's context reside in one single source. So it has to be shared. So this is why we are moving from a consumption and basically production-oriented work culture to a more sharing culture of a different kind, which of course we'll deal with as we go ahead in this discussion. So there was a belief that earlier there was an inherent certainty in Optima, and therefore the Six Sigma, Lean Sigma, the quality movement, the Black Balance scorecard, they all work towards defect removal. The Lean Sigma did away with the waste part of it so that you get it right first time and you do it more efficiently. But now inherently uncertain and good enough. And therefore, when you're working in an arena where unpredictability and uncertainty are the ruling norms, then as I said, just in case may not work. So just in time may not work. So you got to prepare yourself for just in case scenarios. So therefore, inherent uncertainty and good enough to begin with, and you steer your path by kind of, adapting, upgrading, modifying, and changing in a more iterative fashion than kind of, staying stuck to one single ideology or a kind of, dimension of your belief system. Now, this is very important. When you are working in a environment of what we call today, the inherently 4.0 industry developed mindset, then of course, our assumption of inherently bad people is wrong. But there are inherently bad people or good people with bad assumptions is the reality. And it's it's not difficult. It's very, very obvious to us, because what happened, it's the assumptions that people grow up with. If you are just able to turn the other side of whatever they have grown up with and the way you see it, if you exchange or share your worldview with theirs, probably there's a meeting of mind. And there could be an assumption that, well, there is nobody who's bad, but inherently, good people with bad assumptions. Now these values and virtues was something which are very important to be understood before we delve into how we will behave in the world of the future, which is to come, which will be the third or the fourth industrial revolution mindset as against the context of the earlier one. Because we see inherent simplicity is there, relevant, inherent certainty is of course not there. There are inherently good people, not necessarily bad ones, but the wrong assumptions is what we have to kind of, settle with. There comes now a question, and this will be a relevant tool for us to analyze, as we'll still discuss in the next half an hour or so after this is over. We've created ebullient circles, in fact, as to how you really would be able to go into a paradigm shift. As I said that, linearity digests death, as we have seen where exponential growth curve started in 2007. In such a situation, remaining stuck with your own systems, your own belief systems, your inherently, assumed values and positions would not be the right way. So how do you really operate from a mindset which is, expansive, which is outside the box, is something that we'll help understand in these 3 or 4 diagrams which follow now. See what we are doing currently when we don't change. When people said that, those 3 fears that I said, fear of failure, fear of judgment by others, and fear of your own cynicism, we remain centered. We operate from what is the center point of this circle. And around the circle, the entire black space is absolutely known to me, every bit I know, and I'm very comfortable, I know everything, and so everything goes right. And I think that, assume that, everything will go the way I think, and you're very comfortable. But there are new facts, there are changes taking place outside us, outside our purview or our domain, which we may or may not be knowing, but it affects us nevertheless. So if the new facts come, we just have to take the step to move ahead on the point on the circumference, open the window, draw the, in fact, open the curtains and then see what is beyond. So now we have moved from the center to the circumference of, or the outer circumference or boundary of my circle of knowledge, I would say ignorance now, basically, or limited knowledge. And I see the window, open the window, I see the color of the water is different outside than the one that I had known so far. So here's an interesting world. And so therefore the curiosity. So this is a new emerging fact which kind of builds a different paradigm in my mind. And I try to then move even further ahead as we see in the next. So now you are able to see much more. And what is important is that this is the empathetic view that you are getting of how others see you, how your customers see you, how your stakeholders see you. How are you seen by others rather than the way you thought people see me as? So this is now a reality bite, but still there is an arena behind the circle. In fact, there is an area which is still not seen by me. So what I obviously do is that take the lesson from the moving earth and I start revolving on the circumference, remaining outside my central circle, but I'm outside and I'm revolving so that I see everything from a 360-degree point of view. But while I'm moving around, when I'm saying that I'm kind of revolving around the central part, still I am actually having a vision which is outside in vision. I'm only seeing outside, outside to inside. Therefore, I take the earth more seriously and start rotating as well, as we see in the next slide. As we rotate and revolve, now I have an outside inside view, an outside outside perspective, and in the moment I'm expanding my horizons of learning. Earlier, I knew what I knew. Then I got to know what I did not know and came to know that which I did not know. But now I'm exploring into the vast world of not knowing what I did not know and what I could not have known. So not known scenarios are now being kind of, explored. And this is how our expansion takes place and our knowledge scenario builds up. And then we kind of, develop richer and larger perspectives of life. And this is where how we stay out of box, unhindered, unlimited by my assumptions, but I'm getting the benefit of the past, of course, but not getting blinded by it or not getting encumbered by that thought process. And I continue to change as and when required and expand the horizons of my knowledge and my wisdom. When now we see all the four, in the first one, we see the fact that I do not change, that's inertia. When I get some momentum, I kind of, generate some curiosity, and then I look at it from an outside perspective, an outsider's perspective, stakeholder's perspective, and then an ever expansive horizon. Now, this is the full picture of how you can stay out of box and you can also get to know the world which you did not know so far. So now if we have to face the future, and therefore this is now in the context coming back to our employment and unemployability and employability part of it. If we have to visit the future, it has to be seen through a different lens. We have to see with a different set of eyes. We have to see it through different set of instrumentalities and perspectives, orientation, dispositions, and using all our 10 intelligences that we thought we did not know so far, but now we can apply them all together. So this is the point which sets the context right now for our discussion further. And thank you very much, Atulji, for this help that you rendered. And I think we have come to the caught on the crux of what the problem is and how the orientation of mind changes, what is the future that can be managed with. And it is in this context now that we'll discuss how the employability issue that we started with can now be matched, in fact, and how we can create our relevance in the emerging future. So now, with this context in mind, I think we have the tool of how to stay out of box. We have the new belief system. We have how things have changed, how this exponential change is creating a VUCA world, how is technology disrupting, cost is becoming halved, the quality is becoming doubled, and processing capacity is getting doubled. This is a very interesting world to stay in. Now, this is not, in fact, it's otherwise a paradise to work, but then there are dark sides to it as well. And therefore, now we have to kind of, really discuss upon what are the context of employability. And as Tulji started with, how do you create this relevance and how do you remain relevant? Now, just to quote a few statistics, in fact, that in the Indian perspective, firstly, if we see, 1 in 3 graduates are unemployed. 3 in 4 IT graduates are unemployed. Almost 80% of engineering graduates are unemployable. Forget about those in humanities and other subjects. The basic cause is probably the mismatch between the learning streams they take and the opportunities that are offered or known to them, and of course, their basic inherent competence or lack of it. Now, how do you define that competence? Of course, we have seen those skills that would be relevant, in fact, and how does the competence gets enhanced without the education system, the education policy, the education curriculum, the methodology, and the societal, frictions not being removed really take place. Employers, educated, in fact, the educators and the students, as also the the government, they in fact stay in parallel universe today, as we see. So the point is that first thing that needs to be really taken to account is the fact that they need to be brought in together in an integrated manner. There is, of course, an MHRD statistics which says that 85% of students reported they are not fully equipped to career decisions. Why? There could be another, in fact, survey which shows that in 2018, only 5% of schools in India really provided educational and vocational counseling and guidance. Now, the need was, of course, the demographic Indian advantage that we need to take. The need is to connect youth to work, but learning not necessarily linked to employment being the cause is a big attrition, big point of creating a friction, and providing timely guidance or not providing it could play a major role. Now, this was the issue as far as the context of methodology is concerned. Now, if you can have a process where a student can be made aware of all the possible opportunities that he or she can have through a process-based system, and that's what this is the trend, that this is how the career education would take place. That yes, you are made aware of not just the 6 fields of operation, there'll be so many clusters, there'll be so many pathways, and so many 1100, 1200, 1500, 2000, 3000 occupations. Now, firstly, the child is made aware. Before that, a child can get assessed on what his career choices are in the sense of alignment with his personality, in alignment with his interest. Because ultimately, the industry 4.0 has few principles actually of governance. The industry 4.0 principle says that, you know, the education of the future has to be child-centric. So far what happens, because of the industrial, first and second industrial age context, in fact, and infrastructure, which was basically to serve a different purpose. The education was to serve the purpose of industry 1.0 or 2.0. And therefore, more of standardization, more of compliance, and linearity was subject of the teaching. And that is how it's no wonder that a system that was designed to produce people who would work in factories will definitely give them people who would be, in fact, capable of doing the job. But now the industry 4.0 principle is that no, the purpose is larger. It's not just to, because the work of the past will not necessarily be relevant. The workforce and the workplace would be very different. They would be more attuned to the new dimension of the third and the fourth digital revolution, where whatever is programmable and predictable would be taken up by the machines. And we see the emergence of what you call the homo machines and the robotic sapiens. So robo sapiens and homo machines are getting intermixed, where we talk not only of robotics, but cobotics. So there will be a very different orientation to the kinds of jobs that will be available. And of course, not that there'll be job losses, in fact, to the extent that there'll be people who will be unemployed. They'll be unemployed for a different reason, because if they don't upgrade the skills, they don't unlearn and relearn the skills that are relevant, of course, they'll be not only unemployed, but they'll become irrelevant to the context. And that will be a situation much worse than being exploited in the current industrial context. Here you are exploited, but exploitation doesn't mean that still you are being cared, you are wanted. But once in the future, if you become irrelevant, that's something which is to be guarded against. So the industry 4.0 principles are that instead of demand-led, it has to be, rather than supply-led, it will be demand-led. That is one possibility. Competency-based rather than knowledge-based. It incorporates the disruptive technologies and skill sets as we have enumerated. Lifelong learning instead of front-loaded learning. Now, the point was that so far, we were learning once for say 10, 20 years, and then we would live on that forever. Now, in fact, the question is not only for the youth, but it's actually employability of those who are the digital immigrants too. People who are born later as well. They'll have to keep on reinventing themselves as, you know, the age span grows up and people have to remain in working, situation even post their so-called retirement. The point is that they'll have to continue to reinvent themselves because there's exponential change and they have to constantly adapt to grade. So agility and adaptability would be the 21st century competencies overarching. Lifelong learning and instead of front-loaded, because they'll have to change their orientation several times according to the needs. The rule of the game here would be that there are no golden rules. The only golden rule would be that there would be so many contingencies emerging, and you have to answer to each and every contingencies as you go forward. Of course, these principles have also been incorporated in the National Policy of Education, where modular degree instead of one-shot going. So therefore, transdisciplinary approach, and more stress being laid to vocational and skill-based. Some kind of a semblance of respectability being granted to them. And that is how, because ultimately work is, again, you say, it completes you. It is more of a meaning to you rather than just being a source of economic employment. So basically, in the larger context, we'll have to change our consciousness and respect that is alluded generally to the vocations and the skill-based work. That will also has to come along. The emphasis, as we saw, on EQ, more than, and spiritual quotient, and of course the entrepreneurial intelligence, the strategic intelligence, the ecosystem awareness, the Platonic intelligence, and the ethical intelligence, along with this, would become more relevant. And that is how, that is going to be the mode, in fact, in which the people will have to be prepared and taught. Focus would therefore now be also on purposefulness. What is the purpose of education, and the context in which we are going to align ourselves, where it leads to overall happiness and well-being, rather than just being a support to me economically. Global research globally has proved that the OECD learning framework of 2030 is something that education should create more worth of the individual. It should enrich me, it should enlarge my capabilities, the competencies, and above all, the new consciousness of my being relevant to not only myself and people outside me, or the context outside me, but also all those around me. So it is like that ecosystem awareness, which means that from the narrow self-interested, egocentric approach, moving to the larger ecocentric context of learning. So that would then be the context in which our whole education has to revolve around, and education would then be preparing the individual, the competence. It will imparting him the skills and the emotional resilience to face the world, which will otherwise be unpredictable. And it will not be based on some kind of a false sense of equilibrium, but a constant source of disequilibrium, or at best, as I say, a moving equilibrium. And that is very, very important, because dynamic equilibrium is something that we heard so far only in chemistry when we are dealing with fluids. But now it's a real life experience that the world of uncertainty and volatility has to be best handled with a spirit of managing the dynamic equilibrium around the context. So that is the nature of education, the principles on which the education has to be built, not on linearity, not on conformity, not on standardization, but creativity with a lot of, not central commanding authority, but more dispersed, more centric to the student, and actually based on the principles of the third and the fourth industrial revolution, where more and more dispersed and distributive knowledge sources, in fact, and areas of command, rather than, command control and top down from the teacher down. But now it's more participative. Education today has to be more like a conversation with the students. The National Policy of Education has built upon a lot of these principles. And I think with the institutional changes and the governance mechanisms and the course curriculum change, I think that is the way to prepare our students for the next possibility of their being successful in the future as well. Now, when we discuss this future, it's very interesting that we have to deal with larger context, not just education alone of this, but your consciousness, as I've been telling about, has to be raised. We have to counter two very great forces. One is, of course, the climate change. Climate change is, of course, a symptom, but the real problem is global warming. And therefore, there has to be an answer to this and understanding. So when a youth grows in the future, one has to be in alignment with those values, which are more towards what I would call sustenance of and sustainability. As somebody rightly said, that there are 7 to 8 useless things in life. When data is irrelevant unless it converted to information. Information, unless it converted into a technical know-how or a knowledge, it's useless. And technical knowledge is useless unless it's converted into a business proposition. A business proposition or model is useless unless it's converted to something which is scalable. And scalability is relevant if it is not sustainable. So ultimately, of course, it leads to happiness. Unless it leads to happiness, I would say it's useless. But even if we stop at sustainability, we have to understand the context of what there are people in talking about, where there's one Paul Hawken, in fact, who's talking about the project drawdown. Now, that is the new kind of awareness about climate and climate change, because he seems to have discovered 100 ways in which, this can be reversed. And reversed not in a sense that, you increase the carbon footprint, but all the greenhouse gases with methane and other things, in fact. And they have, what the project drawdown has done is a very interesting context where they have mapped, measured, and detailed the 100 most important ways in which this could be reversed. And out of them, they say 20 are the most important. At least 20 are doable right now. 80, of course, will have to be discovered later. I mean, 80 could be done, 20 are the ones which could still be emerging. And out of them, we'll be very surprised that the 5 topmost this consciousness or awareness arenas are how we use the land use, how we manage our food and food waste, and how we produce food, in fact, in conditions that we use, in fact, and prevent wastage, how we manage our energy resources, and how we respect our women and girls, the girl education, the family planning. Those are the most important, almost to the tune of 20-21% of the problem lies there. If we are able to, we can sort it out. And of course, then the materials, awareness about renewable materials, in fact, materials which can be re-engineered, in fact, and brought in again, and through the process of course, along with the sequestration process. So you reduce, replace, and learn the principles of biosequestration. So very surprisingly, what we thought when we thought about renewable energy and climate change, that we reduce the carbon footprint, that's not alone. It is, in fact, something there you have to actually have a not net neutral carbon footprint, but actually net neutral negative carbon footprint, which would be able to take us out. And so if this students of tomorrow or the youth of tomorrow has to be very well aware about this reality, and in fact, in the ways to solve it in a manner which has not been sorted out in the capitalist liberal economics mode, where more and more out of less and less or limited resources was probably now the cause of a great inegalitarian society that we have created, where 1% of the people in the world consume or have more than maybe 50 to 60% of the total wealth of the world. Now, and of course, it has led to this kind of a situation where global warming has become a reality. So the economic system and the climate change are all interlinked. And therefore, there are talks around common good balance sheets. There are talks about the Buddhist economy being kind of brought in, and post-capitalism, and we talk about humanizing capitalism, and we talk about conscious capitalism. Now, this is the new awareness. This is the new consciousness that has to come in when a child, in fact, or the youth today is in fact enabling or preparing himself for the future. There is another very important element which we can't just leave to chance, and that's technology. So now it's all very good to say that this technology is changing and we got to respond in reaction time, and then we need to manage the things with adaptability, upgradability, modifiability, and agility. But the point is, how will it happen? It's easier to say, and therefore the whole context has to be understood. We have to refine our paradigm of thinking about technology. And as we've seen this technology, in fact, what we find, the few things that are very noticeable is that, as I said that at the start of my talk, that we are dealing with godlike technology with a Paleolithic mindset and a medieval institutional framework. We have information overload, which leads to cognitive limits of humans. We have addictive usage of technology, and this leads to what kind of social validation being the prime need, in fact, and this leads to fake news, and this fake news plays upon our confirmation bias. Just look at what's happening on the Indian media or the television, particularly the electronic media today. There's polarization, there is outrage, there is a lack of trust, and there are bots and deep fakes, and there is a talk around post-truth and truth. Now, this is a very confusing world, which the youth of tomorrow or today even has to really contend with. Now, information load is existing, but what does it lead to? It leads to shortening your attention span. It shortens our attention span. Addictive use leads to social isolation, which is very important. Mass narcissism leads to teen depression and suicide. And this become a major global cause of worry for the the digital natives particularly. Fake news, of course, is absolutely leading to breakdown of all sense making that we have had so far. Polarization, of course, deals with a lot of conspiracies and extremism coming to play. And of course, bots and deep fakes, of course, have created what is we call the post-truth world. Now, this is the situation as it is, but why has it come up? Because, you know, is it the responsibility of those who create those technologies and people who live with it? It's probably with a kind of, they have all a reasonable, you know, reason for it. Well, how does this all happen? If you ask the people who are producing this technology, they say that, well, what can we do? And you see what the Facebook guys and the Twitters and the Snapchats and the Twitter people, in fact, are all saying that, you know, give users what they want. We are not party to anything else, but we are giving the users what they want. We want to disrupt everything. That's the belief. Technology is neutral. So it's up to one who uses it is important. So the buyer beware. Who are we to choose? I mean, as a technology provider, I'm not the one who's to choose the technology. Thank you. Growth has to be at any cost. There is design is there to convert a customer. You are by design just to this attention and surveillance capitalist economy. It's just to catch up your attention. So the systems are all designed to convert users by making them habitual users of the platform they are into. Once they get into it, it's very difficult for you to come out. The YouTubers, in fact, who say this, they find recommendations, and 70 to 80% of the time, it's the recommendations that, you know, if you just Google anything or you click on a YouTube, you get so many recommendations, and therefore the time that you thought would be well spent is absolutely wasted many a times on things that you earlier did not even think of watching. And of course, the idea is that you are obsessed with metrics, the TRPs, the people who kind of watch you, the people who are in fact following you. So rather than, so this is in fact leading to a lot of negativity. And of course, what you say is that capturing attention is the important objective of this technology providers. And therefore what we may say, it's never going to be the way, in fact, in which we want, but that's the way it is. So what does it lead to actually? If we see the pattern in this madness, or the method in this madness, is that few of these factors are basically, they minimize the responsibility of who's providing the technology. And of course, commodifies human beings. And therefore, if you are living as a youth, that's the challenge. You get commodified, and the minimized responsibility of the one who's providing to you. So now unless we get to the new paradigms and the new values instead of these old ones, that I'm not responsible, who cares, it's not my choice, I'm not the one who's responsible, technology is neutral, and so on. We have to move to new terms, in fact, and new paradigms, which would like see in terms of more, the youth of tomorrow will have to be challenged to create that, you know, how is, instead of saying that, you know, we are exposing you to the worst of whatever we have, an overload of information, I care about the vulnerabilities, how humans are vulnerable. So what causes them? The new realization that find a mechanism to strengthen human brilliance rather than, you know, commodify the human mind and the human brain. You choose, choice is inevitable. You can't, you have to choose, because between growth and moderate growth and the damage it causes is something which we have to actually take cognizance of. So we just can't be oblivious of the fact that I'm not responsible for what the technology does. And this technology will have to be therefore designed to enable wise choices rather than the choices which we do by default. So you have to create that kind of a stealth, that kind of competence, that kind of inherent understanding of the reality around, that you don't get misled by those who tend to mislead you, and in this attention grabbing economy. So rather than obsessed with matrices, it's like you have to be obsessed with what is meaningful to you. So that is the transfer, that's the changed idea, the consciousness, or it actually nurtures awareness rather than, you know, plays upon your ignorance. Because, you know, technology, this godlike technology plays on our vulnerabilities, these vulnerabilities that we have seen. Just imagine what is going to happen when it actually plays upon our strength. That point of singularity which people say by 2045 is going to emerge, where technology will become smarter than humans. Now that is a very different thing, and cognitive thinking would also be imbued into the technology and the algorithms of the future. So algorithm governance would be, of course, and may become the dominant mode of governance. So this is the future that the youth of today would be actually exposed to. So all that issues of information overload, this polarization, this post-truth mechanism, and the disorientation can be handled, provided your assumptions change and the new values. There are ways in which the technology can be humanized rather than the way the industrial revolution actually dehumanized all of us. So I would say that this godlike technology can always be used, in fact, to drive the driverless car. It can give us the competence, it can give us the acumen to manage technology, not by controlling necessarily, because see, gone are the days when control was relevant. As we have said, the infrastructure of the third and the fourth industrial revolution is more dispersed, is more participative, more conciliatory, more collaborative, more given to facilitation rather than control. So that principle has to be understood here. And I would say that, driving the driverless car, not by controlling the steering, but by determining the destination of technology, which means that technology doesn't become a monster. So those ugly prognostications are not made, and human beings continue to kind of, maintain. Of course, not that it's going to happen so easily, because while there's a bright side of the net, there is a dark side of the net. The net neutrality issues, the control by the government and control of so many things, especially in the COVID times, when your health data is available to everybody because you are so vulnerable. And that's the time where all of us are so willing to give all the data. But just imagine if that information is misused. So there's always a danger that when you deal with technology, there is a lot of skepticism, not just in sharing your Aadhaar details, but of course, more so your health details. So, but there is, in fact, a way that, yes, as we are growing with technology, our biggest problem is that these problems are becoming bigger than our capacity. So we have to definitely, this is the crux of the problem. If you have to keep the youth employable, you have to increase this capacity of self-governance, this capacity to know yourself, know the person around you, know the surroundings in a different consciousness frame where you understand the hyper-connected interconnectedness of the globe. So you globalize, you do things with top-class technology wherever you are, but then never lose the sense of the forest around you, not just count of the trees, but the larger forest, the big picture and the small details together. You got to travel light with no mental baggage. That's the way forward, in fact, of creating a different kind of a consciousness where we have to upgrade human beings, in fact, despite this godlike technology, and where we create different kinds of consciousness, which I would call, as somebody was telling the other day, that from geostrategic consciousness of the past, of the first and the second industrial revolution, to the biospheric consciousness, which means this whole project drawdown, this whole understanding of humanizing technology, of managing the course curriculum with a lot of transdisciplinary content, which makes creative use of time that we spend in school. And of course, COVID has proved that schools are not just places. Learning can take place even elsewhere. So that is a big move, in fact, and we see that a lot of online courses and MOOCs available now. I think there will be a lot of democratization of society, democratization of education, democratization of technology, and democratization of the understanding of knowledge. And the whole association of the consciousness of living in the post-capitalist economic world, where common good, where individual profit cannot be at the expense of the common good or the larger interest of the stakeholders, from shareholders to larger multi-stakeholder mode of economic situation and dispensation. There is a long way to go, in fact, and it may not be necessarily possible to kind of squeeze it all into 1 hour discussion. But I think what my attempt was to kind of open up more relevant questions than answer them, basically, because that's what this whole technology around innovation and design thinking is based out, that you deliver not what is right and wrong, but there is always a better way to find out. And through iteration, we can kind of create what is right, relevant, and more sound, and something that will hold us in good stead. And that is how we plan the future that has arrived, in fact. And I would like to kind of just end this whole talk with kind of summing up of what I feel is very relevant for us to understand and take home the context of how will we change? What is it that we need to kind of, transform ourselves into? And in our thinking, in our saying, in our doing. Well, as far as thinking is concerned, we have to therefore move from the egocentric approaches to larger ecocentric approach, from the scarcity mindset to what is called the abundance mindset, from systematic outlook to more systemic outlook. Systematic was a managerial competence. Systemic is a leadership context, the biospheric consciousness, the larger consciousness, the industrial age, trivia, rather than moving on to the knowledge age wisdom, which is like today, which I call, it's a technological disruptive age, but it's also the best part of it is it's also a human age. So we can humanize more and more things, in fact, and conventional economics to new age economics, from inherent constraints, as we saw, to inherent possibilities and potential, from program thinking to a perspective. Now, that is important rather than be inhibited or limited in a program thinking process. People inherently bad to people inherently good. Now, that was very relevant because with people are inherently good, but with bad assumptions. And ultimately, rather than being uncomfortable with ambiguity, get to be more comfortable with ambiguity and deal with it rather than run away from it. As far as speaking is concerned, now this was about your thinking. Now speaking, for the youth would be transformed into from I and my to we, us and all. Language of control and command to language of facilitation. That's the larger dispersed, in the dispersed environment, democratized environment. From telling to active listening, because you got to be very actively listening to what's happening around, and then listen to something, silent knock of opportunity. You listen to that voice of silence. Now that is the new consciousness frame which we have to actually keep ourselves alive with, and the using rather than the language of blame to being in fact accommodative of others, and moving from excessive competition of larger size of the pie of the cake, but increasing the size of the cake so that everybody else has. And as far as doing is concerned, that's most important. From judgment to basically accommodation, empathy. Now, empathy is the cornerstone of what is going to happen. We as humans have lost that bit. In fact, it could be because of the influences of overdose of technology and things like that, and attention economy. But being exclusively and self-disposed to being inclusive and empathetic. That is the virtue. And excessively passionate to, as I said, I'll end, dispassionately passionate. Yeah. And being secretive, non-accessible to being open and accessible. That's the beauty of the future that has arrived. And that's the open new age technology, where with open code sourcing, with openness, and rather than the limited inhibitedness of the scarcity to abundance mindset. So moving from the geostrategic to the biospheric consciousness would, I think, be the ultimate key to opening the avenues of employability to the youth of the future. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Rajevji, for a very nice and lucid talk, which has brought in a lot of hope in terms of the shifting from the individualist work to the teamwork. In the word of the Sister Shivani, which I am a disciple of, she says that the harmony is more important than when you want to bring the harmony. So teamwork is very important. So from that perspective, now we will begin the question answer session. The first question is from Manjusha Madam. She's asked that this education system needs to focus on vacation. But how do we ensure that this practical aspect we can bring it at school itself?
See, what is meant by vacation is important, because as I said, and I'll give you an example. See, work and leisure was seen as the two ends of the spectrum. So at the end of the work, the employers, and this is an analogy to education, actually vacation, because people look at work-life balance this way. So what happens is that at this end of the employers, it is 100% work, 0% salary, and 0% leisure. At the end of the worker, it is 100% work, 100% leisure, 100% salary, and 0% work. So now this is the context of today's situation, where education is so boring that, people look for vacation. What happens is that ideally work in itself should be so meaningful. And as you said, ikigai, if you know what you are good at and you know that the society pays for it and you love doing it, and therefore you have a need for society to meet all those things. You can kind of create a 7-day weekend while working. So the whole issue of vacation will have to be looked at a very different context. When you're vacating, you are learning new things. You are being aware of what is life beyond your curriculum. So therefore, the new age education itself is actually focused on broadening the horizon, the visions from the narrow confines of what was supposed to be known to you. Because there are certain principles of mathematics and calculus and philosophy, which of course can be taught. You can't just know it on your own, or you'll take longer time to know. So there is compressed wisdom available in education. But beyond that, that's not the be all and end all. So those kind of methodologies of testing and, not being non-creative totally is probably what people yearn for vacations. So vacations would necessarily not be the ones looked forward to. And even during vacations, the learning can take place. These days, COVID has proved that.
You mean to say that the importance of the personality needs to be assessed in the school time itself, and then according to his strength, he needs to take a profession.
Absolutely. The new national education policy actually does that only. And they say that, it's not even testing. See, psychometric tools which test you, they groove you into certain things. The idea is not that, test yourself, but you assess your interests, you assess those areas where you possibly are good at, and this can be ascertained in many ways. And then reinforced by psychometric analysis that, yes, this is what you're good at. So the chances are that you will, of course, be more successful, more engaged with doing those things which you like, which you are good at, rather than things that are thrust upon you. So I think that will be a very good beginning, that from the very beginning you are aligned to, because this mismatch, as I said, between the learning choices and work. First of all, the word of work is not known to students. Nobody teaches them. Nobody gives them the menu first. So before, and psychometric analysis करते हैं लोग और कहते हैं साहब आप ये maths में आप तेज हैं, maths कर लीजिए. Now, how does maths help me without my knowing my goal in life, what I have to work? So if work is first looked into, that's the starting point. So we have to put the whole curriculum about career counseling upside down on its head. That, first let the child determine his or her goal, and then talk about the curriculum or the major that he or she chooses.
Correct. Mr. Pankaj Agarwal has a question. Mr. Pankaj, can you unmute yourself and ask the question on leadership?
Yeah. So, Rajeev ji, you really touched upon a lot of parts of education beautifully, and I was just listening, on empathy or on systemic approach and etc. What I always see, when you join an organization, they start talking about the leadership. But at education level, when we were there, kids, or right now also I see that there is very less focus on building trying to find out the leaders or giving some lessons like, you said empathy, which is now almost negligible. People do talk just cut to cut and try to get their, work done, even in the large organization where, I'm currently working with HDFC Bank. So why is it that at education level, this kind of, if someone could bring in a small maybe module for the leadership, I believe that will help really good. I see my kids on, one of my, my son is in engineering and my daughter is at 8th standard, and I quite regularly see what are they being taught in the online, but I never see that they are being taught that how to become a good leader, or what is you doing, or anybody doing any kind of giving them any test that to find out अच्छा ये अच्छा leader है, इसको थोड़ा different तरीके से groom करते हैं. So how do you think that will change?
I get your point. Very, 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 first of all, a wonderful question actually, because it actually touches the core of the issue. The point is that, but I think kind of, let's look at it a little differently. The context of today is democratization of decision making, democratization of society. So leadership also has to be viewed differently. Leadership, therefore, now would be not one-upmanship, that I'm better than you and I outshine others. But leadership is growing the best within you, in fact, and kind of conforming to those values which we thought were only the alignments with these new values, this drawdown, this technology alignment, this, relevance of the course curriculum, having those 10 intelligences together. And this need not necessarily be the reason for me to outshine another person. So I should be an Arjun cannot be a Bhim, and Bhim cannot be a Yudhishthira. So I should be good at what I am, and I should be the best at whatever I am. But I should be conforming to those, values which actually make me a leader, which are in conformity with the times of today where I have empathy, where I have understanding, which I have ecocentric, awareness rather than egocentric narrow approach. So this is the context in which leadership also will have to be changed. But yes, this exposure is never given in education curriculum, which of course the national education policy now fortunately actually touches upon and says that, the early child care, those 5 years plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, actually these first 5 years would be very formative of those kind of principles where children gets to know that, yes, how good he is and he tries to enjoy things the way he is rather than what he should be from as per the dictates of his or her parents, or the socialization process and the education process should not determine. So leadership also, I would say, is a context, but I think it is now changed in its approach, because leader and follower should not be, the relationship has changed, because there are no leaders, there are no followers who should be following a leader, but leader and follower together should follow the objective or the purpose which they have to jointly achieve. Now that is the difference of leadership of today. That means a follower and a leader both follow the common point, which is to be achieved, the purpose and the goal. And so therefore it's not an inferior or superior, but yes, helping each other, understanding each other empathetically is leadership of the kind that is accepted in 21st century. I don't know whether that answers your question, but that's my perspective.
I think being a actually, sorry, Mr. Pankaj, can you continue?
Yeah, surely. I think Rajeev ji, you have beautifully said, and as I said, I think it is we who have to. I mean, I was recently part of IIM Jammu, where I was a guide for one of the students. So I raised this topic. I said, when these children come at our place, we start talking about the leadership. Yeah, at even IIM Jammu, if you start talking about these kind of soft skills, you surely will bring in, and as you rightly said, it's not necessarily a superiority, but it is excelling in the kind of thing which you have.
Whatever you are you a Bhim there? Are you an Arjun in what you're doing? That's
yeah. So this is a very apt example which you took, and probably when I write to them, I'll certainly write in this way, because this is what exactly is the need of our.
That's very good, because recently, just the other day, I was with Professor Sahai, and in fact, he wanted that managing self, managing others, lead change, and all those kind of concepts should be built in at IIM. So I was trying to help him build that course actually. So I think that will help you. I don't know whether that. And now I know the source of that. That is bugging.
It is just that I took it to them saying that, boss, you should bring in more professionals to talk with your children, because while you are imparting them good knowledge, but they should also understand what's happening in the industry currently and what are the changes. And if people like you, bring in these kind of changes, we also sometimes pitch in, probably we'll be able to develop better leaders. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure. I think now I know the source of his exasperation now. I think he's working on those lines that you told him to.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Rajeev ji, could you please share a couple of minutes on the challenges, HR challenges of Valley as a whole?
HR challenges?
Industrialization and HR challenges of Valley as a whole, Kashmir Valley, in comparison to practices other part of the country.
Yes, I get your point. See, when I would start with the students first. I mean, HR challenges for the industry is because there's hardly any industrialization here. That's a major problem here. But what I'm dealing with directly, in fact, with students and my interaction says that, their psyche, their emotional well-being is something that has not been nurtured at all. In fact, they face violence, they face poverty, and they find disconnection immediately. I'm so lucky, I consider myself privileged that I could get this 4G network today for the entire 1.5 hours. I was not hoping that I'll be able to see you all and you'll be able to see me through. So the biggest challenge here is to actually, they are without networks. There are areas where even the 4G is only in 2 of the districts where this thing is available to them. So basically the biggest challenge is to firstly expose them to and then nurture their emotional instincts, in fact, and provide them that safety, provide them that comfort, provide them that, purpose of aligning themselves with the mainstream. Otherwise, if bereft of all these efforts, what is happening is that the fabric of society is getting shattered with violence, with the extent of closures every day, with the lack of availability of maybe something as basic as the internet to them. And of course, that's being misused and that's been security is the reason, and security threat is because of that. That's been done. But the major challenge is that because of that, people here, they want to go out of Kashmir. The students here, in fact, the whole purpose of this, my online platform that I have done, and the governor has so asked me, in fact, so seriously that, you implement this, in fact, is basically to align the youth with the mainstream. And this attempt is that, okay, they will at least determine, they'll know what they want. And so therefore the choices that they make will be known to the government, and the government will then work around creating the right skilling infrastructure and the platform and the skilling courses within Jammu and Kashmir. The roads are not being here, built. So roads, in fact, are in shatters. In fact, the southern Kashmir is full of potholes in all the roads. I mean, there are no roads worth the name. So I think road building, the infrastructure support, the kind of then the educational support, and in the education, not only the course content along the new education policy or the national education policy, but also the emotional content where they get that emotional comfort beyond this midday meals and the food that they get. Of course, I mean, the larger issue of socioeconomic poverty and the address of terrorism and violence has to be addressed. But I think if we are able to address things one by one, at least the education part, I think that's the best bet that we can have. And as far as I think I've been here for last almost about 2 months now, and I could see that, I'm well into it. I've interacted with every possible, village student at the level of the panchayat. And I find that that's a great need for us to kind of, actually align their emotions, their spiritual well-being, the physical well-being, and their intellectual well-being all in one.
Great, sir.
So the biggest challenge is lack of integration. Firstly, there is no alignment. So alignment के पहले integration तो होना नहीं है. पहले alignment करना जरूरी है, तभी integration की बात सोच सकते हैं. Please.
In which areas, how the labor force employment will change in India?
See, I remember one talk about, I think, Jeremy Witkins. He has done a lot of work in Germany and he's the one who talks a lot about empathic education and alignment in the third industrial revolution. He talks about the fact that, this globally, we are developing what is called the sharing economy. So in the sharing economy, the social sector, the not-for-profit sector, the community sector, and of course, this whole hospitality, this whole nursing, this whole sector around tourism and hospitality as such, is the area which will develop, of course, as something which will be definitely a result of the change in the industrialization process itself. But my kind of understanding also is that, see, all this will happen, but all those things will not change. See, what will not change, why and how will change. The human needs will not change. The music will remain music. The photography will remain photography. Video will remain video. It's a different issue that photographs are now Snapchats. The videos will now become TikToks, and then kind of, hospitals have from places of, from places to what you call apps to wearables now. So that is how and why the society is changing. Now, the youth, of course, where the labor is concerned, would be employed, would definitely be in this, there'll be a process before the change takes place, ultimately, to whatever people are kind of, prophesizing on. The point is that well before that takes place, there would be at least 1 or 2 generations who will be involved in the transition to building this infrastructure for the new age technology or the new age industry. When it all goes, roboticized by 2040 or say 2045, when they talk about the singularity point. The point is that this transition will generate a lot of employment. And then people would, of course, they will lose jobs, in fact, and unless those skills are aligned to what the need would be. Of course, there'll be technology related skills and orientations and perspectives which have to be kind of, cultivated and developed to reinvent yourself to kind of becoming yourself relevant. But I think that in the transition period for at least a generation or two, there'll be amplification of job requirements for building this infrastructure. For example, if the solar panels have to be built, the solar fitted buildings have to be retrofitted, the alignment with the energy internet, the what you call the internet as such, the information internet, the energy internet, the robotics internet, the mobility internet, the logistic internet, all this will have to be built by people. It can't be built. So therefore, till such time, of course, the situation comes when they would have built everything and the new alignment will come. I think people would have learned enough by then. So the point is that the areas would all remain the same. I mean, it will always be that, the industries would remain the same. The manufacturing will remain manufacturing. There will be not, but of course, it will be manufactured differently and different things could be using 3D technology and printing technology and new materials would be there, but people would always be there. provided, of course, they'll have to now start developing the skill to drive the driverless car. Now, that is the essence of the labor being used, you know, not by controlling the steering, which we are used to, because why should a driver be driving a car? I mean, it's the most boring activity. But therefore, what happened was that when they started the driverless car in Germany, what they did was they would put people on the trucks, of driverless trucks, and the drivers would still hold the steering and would still apply their feet on the pedal. Then gradually they would monitor things on the helicopter and say that now remove your hand and remove your leg. And that is how, in fact, gradually they got used to it, and they now started studying the parameters or the information or the analyzing the data that was available rather than concentrating on driving the car. So there has to be a gradual process of unlearning, relearning, and then kind of, you know, scope for learning the way they have to learn the new things. But I think it's going to happen that way only. It has to be a process of transition before we actually take the final leap. And by the time, I think there would have been enough of learnings for us to know exactly, because to predict anything is nothing deterministic, firstly. Unless we do a lot of other good things, these things will not happen altogether. I mean, we may end up in a disaster. And there'll be many COVIDs of coming, in fact, in future, they'll be repeating as long as genetics and, you know, genetic engineering and more so those frontier technologies of biology would be developed. I think the chances of repeat of COVID and other things of infections, kinds of infections and viruses will always be there. So we have to kind of, you know, tread with great concern, care and compassion, but also with a lot of, you know, fortitude of wisdom. That yes, we have to face something which we don't know, but we have to learn to do things the way they should be, given the context of alignment as it comes.
There is one question by Mr. Muzumdar. He said that present university system is not enough dynamic to take care of the changes in the education. So how do we make it more dynamic? What changes are required?
I think there has to be a revolution. See, because if you improve upon, you are improving upon only a broken system. So, and I find that, I mean, his question is very relevant because the education policy actually addresses that issue. It actually overturns, it actually overhauls and changes revolutionary rather than, you know, going the gradual way. So there's no reason that, you know, yes, the institutions which are defunct cannot be repaired, because if they are repaired, they'll of course be repairing the broken system. So you have to set it all afresh, anew, aligned to the principles of 4.0 that we discussed. And yes, the universities, the schools, the whole mechanism of governance is outdated, because we believe in control and top down, which is not related to the third world industrial revolution. Infrastructure is very different. The whole psyche is different. The whole approach has to be different. So participative, student is center, but here the officials and the bureaucracy who manages become the central point of education. So universities will definitely not be producing what they're not designed to produce.
I think there are no questions. So I think Bhatnagarji can summarize now.
Yeah. Thank you, Sukhanand. And thank you, Rajeev. What a brilliant presentation. A lot of slides with a lot of color and lots of things to think about. I'm just picking some pearls of wisdom because I can never replicate what you said, and it'll take me another hour to do that. So what I really liked, I mean, some of the things that you started off by saying, by prepare for the Monday coming, that is really, it's got a much deeper meaning than the Monday that is coming, going to be in the next 2 days, 3 days. And work enables you to raise yourself up and completes you, that ikigai. I think that is very, very critical also when it comes to deciding what your passion is going to be. And if I were to compare the Indian situation of a child versus the, let's say, in the US or UK, I mean, India has got the support structure of the entire family. So you are never really kicked out of your house. Abroad, at age of 18, you're supposed to be having your own apartment and start earning yourself. I mean, you pay for your college fees, yeah. If you have to go there, or you have to pay for yourself. Despite that, we are not able to inculcate in our kids the skilling part of it. That, you know, you need to be skilled in a certain shape or form. Or if the child says, I mean, abroad, if the child says, I want to become a fireman, it's a very respected field. It is one of the better ones where you can retire by 40 and you can have income for the rest of your life. In India, if you say fireman, the parents will go into depression. And they'll say, well, who's going to marry you? And, you know, put all kinds of emotional stuff onto the child. What I wanted to say here was, look, and this is based on my past experience with NSTC, skilling requires respect. And that respect can come from people like who are hearing this talk and who are addressing in future. We are not respecting the skill certificate. We are still going on to graduation and BSc and BCom and B something, BM or M something, MBA, etc. And as HR people, I think that is the single biggest mindset you have to change. Say, for example, I'll give you an example here. There's a person who represented India in the gems and jewelry contest at the international stage. There's an international Olympiad that happens of skills every 2 years. Now, this person was 5th pass. He won a silver medal on his making his gems and jewelry. He earns 2 lakh rupees a month. Now, would you kind of, if you were to employ him, would you ask him, why haven't you completed his education? The guy is so good. He can deliver through his hands. And he delivers such quality that you'll be astounded. And he's earning the amount of money that any other MBA will make it after 10 years. The fact of the matter is, his skill has to be respected. He has to be respected for what he has, rather than what he doesn't have, and you keep prodding him, look, unless you do your history, physics, maths, and all the other kind of subjects, and you get up to 10th or 11th or 12th and get a matriculation, etc. Why do you find people hanging out of windows? You know, that famous photograph that came in from Bihar, where people were trying to make others cheat and they were hanging out of windows. Why? Because they need a matriculation certificate. They need an intermediate certificate. Doesn't matter if they can spell any word right, but they needed the certificate. And that particular, because that's where, if you have to apply for a job, everybody say, are you 10th pass? If you're not matriculation, how can I give you a job? So it finally boils down to the HR community first accepting it. Look, skills is what matters. Second, they have to then change policies within the organization where skilling is respected. Manufacturing requires skilling, which is a very high degree. I mean, there are machines and there are people who run those machines, and the people who work on using the machines to create some very precision kind of stuff. Now, in manufacturing, and I'm now going to the white collar job. I mean, I can give you a very practical example. I was in, we had gone for our 25th year reunion to IIM Calcutta. And the entire batch was there. I mean, there's some 70, 80 people, very seniorly placed, and the people from ACC, MD, etc. And we were talking to the dean, and we asked him, look, show us the placement for the last 10 years. And in the last 10 years, there was not a single placement in production management. IIM Calcutta has 90% engineers, and 90% of those 90% are from IITs. Yep. They come with a engineering background. They have worked on the shop floor. And then when they get out from here, they would rather join an Accenture or a KPMG or a McKinsey and consult Tata Steel, but they won't go to Tata Steel. Why? Yeah. Because when you go from Accenture, you are in a nice little cabin, nicely AC, and if you go straight to Tata Steel, then you'll be on the shop floor. And I'm not just cribbing. I'm party to that myself. I mean, I was in Tata Motors and went to IIM Calcutta, and from there I started jumping to another organization, because somewhere manufacturing again does not get the respect, and maybe part of the caste system, maybe part of whatever it is, but again, that revolution has to take place. Why is manufacturing lagging? Is because of this. I mean, imagine, and we used to make a statement for our own success. The day I find in matrimonial columns, a father-in-law, prospective father-in-law saying, I want a son-in-law who's a welder who earns 45,000 rupees a month, that day we would have succeeded on manufacturing. Abroad you have these make my home, and there are these plumbers who work with overalls and tools sticking out, and they're charging some $80 per hour and all. We don't say anything to them. We don't, but we never use that to aspire our own children or our neighbors or the youth. That is the definition. That is the kind of deficiency we are.
Pardon me for just interrupting here. What happens is that, the level of welding and all, the proficiencies that is now being asked in the industry 4.0, things are of a very high order and magnitude. I think now that respect is going to come, because, they'll not only get, because the kind of skills which are level 5 skills in welding, so welding in itself becomes an art rather than a science. So the point is that I think that is where things are going to converge, and where the concept of degree or your skill would be more important than the kind of degree that you hold. That is where the match is going to come at.
The designations with which people are given also, and again, I'm going back to the Tata Motors thing. After the 5th grade, when you start off as a graduate training engineer, your next designation is like a foreman. Now, a foreman, I mean, it just pinches you. It just pinches you. Whereas if you go to Citibank, you become an assistant vice president. Now, what is wrong? Who's decided the designations? I'm saying that's where the change has to happen first. You have to give, as you said, work enables you and it makes you, completes you. So you should be proud of what you're doing. The moment you say foreman, uska to self-esteem wahin pe hi. No, he might be getting more than what he started off with. He may get a good salary, but that is not the way.
No, you're right.
So I think that's where I'm kind of giving it to the HR community as a task that you have to make that change first for the people around. And when they come in, obviously there will be now, in fact, now you'll have to manage robots rather than people. That will become a skill. I mean, that is a skill that how do you manage robots? How do you divide work between robots and people itself? And that itself is going to be a very big thing. So I'm just saying, look, skill development from my point of view, having been in it, that is the single biggest thing, that skilling is not getting the respect that education has. We talk of skill, but we measure education. It should be the other way around.
Very true.
We should measure skill. Person is educated, great. If not, taking him in and ask him to look, you want to get educated in 5, 6 other things, there are online courses. It's not should be the other way around. You finish your education, then we will put you through, leadership skills and competency-based skills and team building and all that bit. No, it should be the other way around. So that is what I'm talking about, the vocational skills bit. And you did talk about the Paleolithic mindset and the medieval institution and the godlike technology. I think that's the transformation. We have to build it within ourselves, because if we're going to be managing youth and we're going to set let's say, a direction for the youth, a path for the youth, that change has to come from within us. And because this is an HR community, a very majority of the people are going to be from HR, this is the thing that I'd like to leave as a thought. And obviously, when we compile this particular session, your presentation will be very, very visible, and your thought process will be nicely heard by people. I just wanted to add that bit on what my particular experience has been with some 32 years of work experience, and with skill development. I've got a passion for skill development. And the other reason that we have to do skill is, if we do not change, very frankly, if we do not change, what will happen? We'll miss this demographic dividend might become a demographic debacle because people are not going to get jobs. The current problem that we are facing, the media, whether it's all the kind of unrest that is happening in various places and all the crime that's being committed or the drugs being used, etc., is because people's minds are empty. Empty minds are is a devil's workshop, basically. And if a skilled mind, even if there's no job, the Indians are so good in jugaad, that jugaad plus skills will actually lead to innovation. It is only the skills that are stopping a person from making jugaad to scalable jugaad, scalable kind of stuff. If he has a skill, he will take some of the jugaad pictures that come out in the media are mind-boggling. How did somebody think of doing something like this? That kind of stuff.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
Can he scale it up? Can he make it a product? Can he make it a service? Can he kind of make
That's
the
very clear. That's very clear.
villages in India use that same technology? That is what we're trying to do. So I think that's where skill development is so essential, that if we do not do, then it's like pollution. Pollution is in Delhi is now on our heads. When the clouds become gray and you can't see the sun, that's when you start running around doing odd day and even day and hide inside the house and go at various times, etc. Same thing with skill development. If we do not get this right in the next 5 years, there will be social unrest more than anything else. So that is, every one of us has to be very conscious of it and try and.
You're all sharing that with you. You're sharing your concern, in fact, and the challenge that you've thrown. That's very relevant and very timely.
And well, last but not the least, thank you for a very enlightening presentation. And Rajeev, you, of course, you've spoken so well, and from a 2G kind of place.
I was just lucky. I think it's all the wishes of you guys that, I was very apprehensive that it will last the entire course of 2 hours now almost. And I thought that, but touch wood, I think it's the urge and the earnestness with which we do that. It was urgent that we have to do it on Friday and we can't wait for Monday. So the urgency and importance both combined together. So conspire together.
I would like to give a word of thanks to Mr. Rajeev Bhadauria ji. It is indeed an honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, because I just got to know that you are also connected to one of the CHROs in Mumbai, and that was amazing to, when I informed him that I'll be a part of the forum today. I definitely be a part of the forum almost every Friday, and you have definitely enlightened the show today. So on behalf of the complete NHRD forum, I really would like to sincerely thank you for sharing all your wonderful views on the VUCA world today. Cobotic, something very, something which got me struck. That was amazing concept that you spoke about. The sustainability part and the flow that you went on with that flow, that was really, really amazing to just, keep on listening to you. And it just went for hours, and we can, actually sit and we can just go on listen to you. So how to make today's youth empowered and sustainable in the new normalcy that you spoke about, that is fab. So thanks once again. I'm sure when we go back to our new normal at our workplaces, especially, with Jaldi live stream, where I've just recently been a part of them as an HR head, which is a Make in India app by Mr. Raj Kundra and Shilpa Shetty. So I'm heading the HR with them. So definitely I'm going to use all whatever you have, shared your values and experiences, which really means a lot. I'm sure that I will be adapting this with the complete team, which will later be, used with the complete app in India. Thank you so much for being a part of this special forum and sharing all your intellectual views. It really means a lot to us. Thank you once again.
I'm absolutely a grassroots person. I go to villages and do things. In fact, I started my career in one of the villages in Talcher, and I'm still now back to village, in fact. And actually, there's a back to village scheme of J&K government, which I am now a part of. So it's going to the villages and settling things right. Like Atulji, I'm also passionate for the skills of the people and the vocational skills and guidance that I'm part of now. In fact, officially, thankfully, it's been a cosmic conspiracy that I'm not part of this. I get this opportunity here in the remotest village of J&K and Uttaranchal and Uttarakhand, that I'm being able to do this. So thank you very much. It was my pleasure talking to all of you. In fact, in such a luminary, in fact, all of the world. And of course, the HR fraternity. It's great, in fact, talking to everybody.
Thank you so much, Intrada. So to introduce such a platform where, we are connected all at just one place, one forum in Mumbai, Srinagar, Kolkata, all like, we feel like one India at 8 p.m. on Fridays. So amazing thing, amazing.
Indranil, I think it's kept on Friday as good in profundity of Friday evenings, not just putting it away.
Thank you, sir, for making it happen, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was really nice meeting you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Let's aim for the Monday now.